There are boxes in royal closets no one dares to open, not because they are locked, but because they hold too much truth. And this one had been sitting there untouched for decades. Princess Diana's jewelry box wasn't just a container for royal gems. It was a time capsule, a silent witness. And what Prince William found inside didn't just leave him speechless, it changed him. It started as a routine visit to Kensington Palace. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. But when a longtime housekeeper mentioned something Diana had asked to be kept safe for the boys, William followed her down a narrow hallway into a storage room most had forgotten existed. That's where he saw it. A velvet-lined box smaller than a chest, but heavier than it looked. When he opened it, it wasn't the diamonds that stopped him. It was what lay beneath them. Notes, a locket, a sealed envelope marked for William. A single line in Diana's handwriting that made him sit down. And as he read, as he uncovered what his mother left behind, William realized this wasn't about jewelry. It was about truth, legacy, and a mother's unfinished story. What he found would change the crown forever. The key inside the frame. It was a quiet afternoon at Kensington Palace. The halls echoed faintly with the sound of distant steps. But for Prince William, the silence felt deeper than usual. He had come not for ceremony or duty, but to visit a small exhibit curated in memory of his mother. A rotation of Diana's belongings, carefully arranged, delicately preserved. He had seen most of it before. Her favorite clutch. A handwritten note to Harry about his first school play. Photographs behind glass, but then his eyes landed on a frame he hadn't truly looked at in years. It was a silver-bordered photo of Diana in a soft blue suit, holding baby William on the palace lawn, his own chubby fingers in her hair, but something about the frame tugged at him. The base was thicker than normal, weighted. His fingers instinctively turned it over. There, nestled in the back panel, was a small compartment he never knew existed. It slid open with resistance, as if the box was guarding more than just memory. Inside, a single brass key, no tag, no inscription, just weight and silence. He didn't call for help, didn't ask questions. Something in him knew this wasn't a mistake or a coincidence. It was a trail Diana had left behind for him. He slipped the key into his jacket pocket, thanked the staff, and quietly asked to visit the old linen storage wing, a place he hadn't stepped into since childhood. The room was dim, filled with mothball-scented trunks and outdated drapery rolls. And there at the far end, beneath an old Union Jack flag folded over an antique chest, was a wooden box with gold accents. The lock matched the key exactly. It clicked open with a quiet finality. No creak, no drama, just the hush of air escaping something that had been sealed for decades. Inside was a jewelry box, not ornate, but personal. Worn edges, soft fabric, the kind of item not chosen for value, but for intimacy. He opened the lid. On top were the pieces the world had seen, the sapphire ring, pearl earrings, the tiara that once made headlines. But as he lifted the first tray, the breath caught in his throat. There was another layer, thinner, hidden just beneath the satin. It took a careful tug to lift it, and under it, a small blue envelope, his name written in his mother's elegant, unmistakable hand, William. No address, no date, just the weight of love wrapped in secrecy. His fingers trembled as he held it. Not from fear, but something else, something deeper, reverence. Diana had left this for him. Not for the crown, not for the world, just for him. Whatever it was, it had waited patiently through decades of change, through grief, through silence. And now it was time. The key had opened more than a box. It had opened a chapter that Diana never got to finish, and William wasn't ready, but he knew he had to read. The jewelry box no one knew existed. William stood frozen, the envelope still in his hands, unsure if he was holding a letter or a fragment of time. Everything in the room felt still, as though even the dust dared not move. He didn't open it yet, not here. Not surrounded by the shadows of forgotten storage and flickering bulbs. He carefully returned the envelope to the box and lifted the whole thing, holding it close like something sacred. This wasn't palace protocol. There were no aides, no curators, no royal press, just a son following a thread his mother had left behind. Back at his private quarters, he locked the door behind him. The box sat on the table like it had been waiting for years to finally speak. He didn't rush. He unlatched the top again, slowly lifting the upper tray with the familiar jewels. Beneath them, the second layer remained untouched. The envelope was there, but so was more, a velvet pouch sealed with a faded ribbon, a Polaroid folded in half, and a pair of earrings still wrapped in a handkerchief, as if Diana had placed them down in a hurry, planning to return, but never did. He opened the envelope first. The letter wasn't long, just a few lines, but each word pulled at something inside him he didn't know was still bruised. My darling William, if you're reading this, then someone you trust has helped you find this box. I hope it means the time is right. These aren't just my jewels. They're moments I couldn't explain while I was alive. Pieces of who I was and who I hoped you'd become. You'll know what to do with them when the time comes. He read it again and again. There was no signature, but there didn't need to be. Her voice was there between every word. She wasn't instructing him. She was guiding him. He turned next to the velvet pouch. Inside was a necklace he didn't recognize. Gold, delicate, with a small charm shaped like a dove. Not the kind of statement jewelry worn at state banquets. This was something else. He had never seen her wear it, not in public, not in photos. And yet, the moment he held it, it felt familiar, intimate, personal, a keepsake of a memory he had never known he shared. The folded photo revealed a younger Diana standing barefoot on a beach, hair windblown, holding a toddler he now realized was him. There was no crown in that picture, no obligation, just a mother and her child lost in a private world the cameras never caught. On the back, scribbled in her writing, it read, "This is the only version of me I ever wanted you to remember." William sat back, breath caught in his chest. This box had been more than forgotten. It had been hidden on purpose, not to deceive, but to protect. It wasn't meant for royal eyes, only for his. Because Diana hadn't just left behind a legacy of fame. She had left behind the truth. And it was only beginning to unfold. The note beneath the sapphire. He thought he had seen everything. The letter, the photo, the dove pendant that somehow carried more weight than any crown. But when William returned to the jewelry box the next morning, something told him he had missed something. Not overlooked, but not yet revealed. The box wasn't large, but it had layers. False bottoms crafted not by design, but by emotion. Diana had tucked things away, not for security, but for timing. He lifted the sapphire ring, the one the world knew, the one now worn by Catherine, the ring that symbolized both legacy and healing. But as his fingers curled around it, he noticed a shift in the cushion beneath. A subtle movement. He pressed gently, then pulled the lining away. Tucked flat beneath the ring was a second note, shorter than the first. Unfolded, it carried just 2 lines. "You gave me courage when I had none left. This is yours now. Use it to fight for what I couldn't." There was no signature, no date, just words. Raw, unearthed, unmistakably hers. William read them twice, then looked again at the ring. He had chosen it for Catherine not only because it belonged to his mother, but because it held history. He had believed it was the most precious heirloom Diana left behind. But now he realized it was more than a symbol of love. It had been a parting gift from a mother trying to tell her son something the world would never let her say aloud. The note pierced deeper than he expected. Because it wasn't only a reminder of loss. It was a transfer of responsibility, a call to carry what she had carried alone. A charge to protect what mattered most, even if it meant standing against expectation. William set the note down with care, but his heart was pounding. He turned again to the box, noticing every detail now like a map. One of the earrings in the silk handkerchief had a tag, not a price, but a date, star 1995 star, the same year Diana had given the Panorama interview. The year she'd spoken her truth to the world, the year she stopped pretending. William began to understand. These weren't just mementos. They were markers, each one connected to a moment she had fought to survive. And beneath it all, beneath the jewelry and handwritten notes, lay the real inheritance, not the diamonds or the tiaras, but the invisible weight of truth passed down in silence. That night, William didn't sleep. He sat in the quiet of his study, the box beside him, the ring resting in his palm. He had once believed Diana's legacy lived in charity work and global fame. But now he understood it lived in these hidden pages. The unspoken parts of her story that she had left for him to finish. And what waited beneath the next layer would force him to ask a question he hadn't dared since childhood. Had someone tried to keep his mother quiet from the inside? A piece she never wore in public. The following day, William returned to the box with a heavier heart. The ring, the notes, the photo, each one a memory wrapped in truth. But what haunted him most was what still might be hidden. Diana had never done anything by accident. Every detail, every ribbon, every fold in that velvet was deliberate. And as he examined the lower compartment again, his fingers brushed against the back panel. It shifted, not much, just enough to let him know something was behind it. Carefully, he pried it open. Inside was a single cloth pouch, worn and delicate. No tags, no royal crest, just age and silence. He opened it slowly and found a necklace unlike anything else in her collection. No sapphire, no diamond. Instead, a slender gold chain with a small pendant, an engraved seashell, cracked along one edge like it had once been dropped. It wasn't lavish. It wasn't regal. It was intimate. He couldn't remember her ever wearing it in public. No photos, no press clips. He searched his memory and found nothing. That alone made it louder than anything else in the box. The kind of piece not meant for cameras or ceremonies. The kind meant for someone who saw her as more than a princess. There was a tiny piece of paper folded underneath it. A single sentence, "This one reminded me of who I was before the palace." William held it in his hands, stunned by how such a small thing could hold so much weight. He realized this wasn't jewelry. It was identity. A symbol of the girl who once laughed on the beach, barefoot and sun-kissed, long before duty and titles consumed her. The seashell was worn, imperfect, ordinary, but it was real. Diana had clung to that piece of herself in silence, hiding it away not because it wasn't worth showing, but because it was too precious to share. He sat back, eyes fixed on the pendant, and felt something shift inside. He had spent years trying to live up to the idea of his mother, the icon, the martyr, the global saint. But here in this box was the woman. And she wasn't asking to be remembered as the people's princess. She was asking to be remembered as someone who never stopped trying to be whole. It was a side of her he had never truly known. And it hit him. This necklace, this private reminder of her real self, had been tucked away not to be hidden, but to be preserved for him, so that he would never forget. She had once been just a girl who wanted love, freedom, and peace. The ring may have gone to Catherine. The tiaras may return to the vaults. But this would stay with him, not in the crown jewels, but close to his heart. Because the real crown Diana left him wasn't made of gold. It was the truth. And it had just taken another form. Charles was never meant to see this. The necklace still rested in William's hand when he noticed something odd at the base of the box. An almost imperceptible seam along the bottom lining, as if something had been tucked beneath the final layer. He had already uncovered letters, mementos, even symbols of Diana's private identity. But what he found next shifted the air around him. Tucked deep beneath the final fold was a sealed envelope marked in her handwriting once again. But this one was different. This one had 5 words that froze him in place. For William only. Never for Charles. He didn't open it right away. He couldn't. He just stared at the words, stunned by their clarity, by the wall they instantly built. Diana had written it with intention, knowing the weight it would carry. This wasn't a letter meant to be shared or analyzed. It was a confession, or a truth too fragile to survive public light. For years, William had wrestled with the legacy of his parents, the love, the pain, the fracture that defined his childhood. But this letter, this was something she had kept back from everyone, even his father. With shaking hands, he carefully broke the seal. The handwriting was unmistakable, her loops, her slants, the emotion in the ink. She hadn't written it as a princess or as the arranged wife of the future king. She had written it as a mother. And what it revealed was not scandal. It was sorrow. She described a time when the palace became more prison than home. When voices around her made her question her own. When aides would deliver carefully crafted briefings that stripped her of her confidence in small, calculated ways. She never named names, but she didn't have to. William could hear it in her tone, strategies, decisions, patterns designed not to support her, but to contain her. She had been monitored, managed, positioned as unstable to protect other reputations. And while Charles had stood by some of it publicly, she suggested he hadn't known the full extent, or had chosen not to. "I don't know if your father saw what was done in my name," she wrote. "But I do know this, you must never let silence become tradition. Speak when they expect you to bow." It wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry. It was the quiet voice of someone who had carried pain with dignity and was finally releasing it. William sat motionless for a long time after reading it. He had always believed his mother was misunderstood, but this was confirmation that went beyond press or gossip. It was a private truth she had carried alone, waiting for the right hands to hold it. Charles was never meant to read this letter, and William now understood why. It would break him. But for William, it was not destruction. It was clarity. The past had been tangled in image and illusion. But now, piece by piece, his mother's truth was becoming undeniable. And that truth would soon reach Catherine. Because there are some things too sacred to keep hidden, even from the one you love. Kate deserves to know. He didn't tell her immediately. 4 hours, William sat with the box closed again, the sealed envelope now folded neatly back into its place. The room was quiet, but his mind was loud. Diana's voice echoed in his chest like a drumbeat, steady and relentless. Speak when they expect you to bow. That line haunted him, not because it was harsh, but because it was true. And he knew the longer he kept this to himself, the heavier it would become. By evening, Catherine found him in his study. She noticed it before she spoke, the silence in him, the stillness in his movements. She had seen that look before on his face, the day of Diana's memorial, the day George was born, the day he stood in Westminster Abbey wearing his uniform, carrying not just duty, but legacy. This was the same look, only quieter, more personal. He didn't make a speech. He simply opened the box, placed the letter in her hands, and whispered, "She left this for me. For us." Catherine read it without asking questions. Her fingers gripped the page as her eyes moved down each line. When she finished, she didn't speak for a long time. She just placed the letter gently back into the box and rested her hand on his. "I think she was waiting for you to be ready," she finally said. "And you are." William looked at her, not as the Duchess, not as the future queen, but as his partner, the one person who had carried this journey with him from the beginning. And in that moment, he realized why Diana had left the box behind. It wasn't only for him to understand her. It was for him to prepare the world for what would come next. And Catherine was a part of that plan. There were more items in the box they hadn't even explored yet. But this letter was the heart of it, the turning point. Catherine reached in and lifted the seashell necklace gently from its pouch. She turned it in her hands, quietly stunned by its simplicity. "She didn't want the world to know her," she said. "Until you did." William nodded. He had grown up learning how to wear silence like armor. But this box, this collection of whispered truths, had dismantled that armor in just days. Now, with Catherine beside him, he felt something different. Not pain, not confusion, purpose. Diana had written her truth, knowing it would one day find its way to the surface. And now it was no longer buried. The story she couldn't finish was in the hands of the very son she had once carried through palace halls with hope in her eyes. And now, William wasn't just holding his mother's legacy. He was about to act on it. Because the next thing he found in the box would change how he saw everything, his father, the firm, and the future he was born to inherit. A decision that changed the air forever. The next morning, William woke with a different kind of weight on his chest. Not grief, not confusion, but resolve. The box remained on the table, its lid now permanently ajar, as if it no longer belonged in hiding. Catherine had gone downstairs to check on the children, but not before placing the seashell necklace in William's hand and saying softly, "She gave this to you so you'd remember who she was. Now it's your turn to show the world who you are." He returned to the box one last time, not to find more, but to feel, to understand what had changed. It wasn't just the letter or the secret compartments or the tokens of his mother's past. It was what they asked of him. Diana hadn't left behind instructions. She had left a mirror. And what William saw in it wasn't just her reflection. It was his future. He would no longer carry the weight of the monarchy as it had always been. He would shape it into something it had never dared to be. Not a fortress, but a home. Not a wall, but a window. His children would not grow up afraid of truth. His wife would never be silenced by tradition. And his mother's story would not remain a carefully curated myth protected by silence and protocol. He gathered the contents of the box with care, wrapping each piece gently as if tucking away a sacred trust. The letter marked "Never" for Charles remained with him, folded into a private journal he now kept locked away in his desk drawer, not to hide it, but to protect it until the time came when it would need to be known. By the end of the week, William had cancelled 2 appearances and asked for a private meeting with senior palace aides. He didn't say much during that meeting. He didn't need to. He simply requested access to certain archives, clarity on scheduling practices from the 1990s, and an internal review of communication protocols. The room shifted. The message was clear. The air had just drawn a line, one not built on rebellion, but restoration. Later that night, he stood outside with Catherine on the palace terrace. The lights of London glittered in the distance, but it was the silence between them that held the most power. "I'm not just inheriting a title," William said quietly. "I'm inheriting her unfinished work." Catherine took his hand. No words needed. Diana had left behind more than jewelry. She had left him a blueprint for change, disguised as a whisper. And now, that whisper had become a vow, a decision that would forever shift the future of the crown, not with noise, but with a steady voice willing to speak where silence once ruled. Because what came next would not be buried in velvet or sealed behind glass. It would be lived. And it would begin with Diana's final wish. Diana's final wish wasn't for herself. The days that followed felt quieter somehow, but not empty. William moved with a new stillness, not hesitation, but conviction, the kind that settles in a man who knows exactly what must be done. He had touched the heart of his mother's story, uncovered the pieces she left behind, and now stood at a crossroads, not between past and future, but between memory and legacy. It would be easy to seal the box again, to let it rest as a private relic of a mother's love. But there was one item left, a velvet pouch so small it had nearly gone unnoticed, tucked beneath the corner lining like an afterthought. Except Diana never did anything without a purpose. William opened it slowly. Inside was a gold locket, delicate and worn at the edges. No jewels, no crown insignia, just a tiny clasp and a single hinge. He opened it, expecting a photo, perhaps of himself or Harry, maybe even one of Diana as a child. But instead, there was a piece of paper folded tightly to fit within the oval. The ink had faded with time, but her writing was still clear. It read, "Let them grow without the chains I wore. Let them rise without the silence I endured." It wasn't about her. Not really. It was about them, about the children, about a monarchy reimagined. Not through rebellion, but through freedom. This was her final wish. Not revenge, not pity, but restoration. A future not bound by the wounds she carried, but transformed by the truth she left behind. William stared at the locket for a long time, feeling the quiet thunder of her words pulse through him. It was the message she never got to speak out loud, not on the record, not to the world. But here, in this fragile locket, she had said everything. He pressed it closed and held it against his chest. The room around him seemed to vanish. And for a moment, it was just him and her. No cameras, no crown, just a boy and the mother who never stopped trying to protect him, even from beyond the grave. He would not bury this, not the letter, not the locket, not the truth. But he also knew the path ahead would not be paved in public declarations. It would be in the way he ruled, the way he raised George, Charlotte, and Louis. The way he protected Catherine. The way he defended the quiet voices before they were silenced. Diana's final wish was not a command. It was an invitation, to break the cycle, to reimagine the throne not as an altar to history, but as a platform for healing. And as William looked toward the horizon from that palace window, he knew the work had already begun. Not in headlines, not in history books, but in the hearts of those she loved most. And the first thing he would do was ensure that the next generation knew her, not as the princess who died, but as the mother who dared to speak, even when no one was listening. Some stories aren't meant to be shouted. They are whispered through locked drawers, worn lockets, handwritten notes folded in velvet. What Prince William found in Princess Diana's jewelry box wasn't treasure. It was truth. Unfiltered, undeniable, unfinished. In that moment, in that room, the heir didn't just reconnect with his mother. He stepped into her legacy. Not the one the world polished for public display, but the one she had tucked away in secret. And from that hidden place, something powerful emerged. Not scandal, not sorrow, but direction. Diana never lived to see her sons become men. But she left them a compass. And William, now carrying both the weight of the crown and the tenderness of her voice, knows what he must do. This isn't about rewriting history. It's about honoring it, completing it, healing it. Because what Diana began in silence, William will carry into action. And as he rises, not just as a prince, but as a father, a husband, a future king, he carries more than duty. He carries her heart. Her truth. Her final wish. And somewhere, if love leaves a light behind, she sees it. Not in jewels. But in him.